The relentless Judean sun, scorching the arid landscape, could not quell the smoldering fire within Judas Iscariot. Unlike the easygoing Galileans, the salt-of-the-earth fishermen with their booming laughter, Judas carried a certain austerity, a quiet intensity, and a deep-seated resentment towards the oppressive yoke of the Roman Empire. Witnessing his people toiling under the heavy burden of taxation and enduring the disdain of their conquerors, Judas's heart seethed with a yearning for liberation. He dreamed of the day when the kingdom of Israel would be restored, the humiliation erased, and his nation would stand tall once more. When Jesus, the carpenter from Nazareth, began to preach about a kingdom of God, with words of both authority and compassion, performing extraordinary miracles of healing and solace, Judas was powerfully drawn in. Could this be the one whom Israel had awaited for centuries, the prophesied Messiah who would redeem his people? Could this be the flame that could ignite the tinder of rebellion and shatter the chains of slavery? Judas placed his fervent, almost desperate hope in the man whose eyes held both the gentle wisdom of a healer and the latent power of a king. Yet, a question lingered, a subtle dissonance in the otherwise compelling picture. What kind of kingdom was he speaking of, and how would it truly be established on this very earth? Judas followed Jesus through the dusty villages and bustling towns of Galilee and Judea, listening intently to the sermons about love, forgiveness, and a kingdom not of this world. At times, these teachings left Judas perplexed, even a little disillusioned. He had anticipated a powerful call to action, a rallying cry to gather an army and rise up against the Roman legions. But instead, Jesus spoke of loving one's enemies, of turning the other cheek, of prioritizing the kingdom of God above all earthly concerns. During long, sleepless nights, Judas often wrestled with the conflicting thoughts that churned within him. Judas thought to himself, "The kingdom. He speaks of a heavenly realm, a place where the poor will be comforted and the afflicted healed. But my people are suffering under the Roman heel now. They need a tangible liberation, a king who can wield a sword and drive out the invaders. This money," his gaze flickered to the leather pouch at his side, "it can help the needy, the sick. But can it buy freedom? Can prayers defeat Roman battalions?" The contrast between Judas's expectations and Jesus's actual ministry gradually became a silent rift in their relationship, an invisible chasm that perhaps neither fully recognized at the time. Judas continued to walk alongside Jesus, still dedicated to his role as treasurer. But in his heart, the initial flame of hope began to dwindle, replaced by growing doubts and a gnawing unease. The silent call from Kerioth, the yearning for national pride and liberation, still echoed in Judas's mind, urging him to seek a solution, a different path to realize his dream of a free and powerful Israel. Judas Iscariot bore the leather pouch, containing the common funds of the 12 like the weight of the world upon his shoulders. Every meager coin, every small gift from those who believed in Jesus, he guarded meticulously. Initially, Judas had felt honored by this crucial responsibility, a testament to the trust Jesus and the other disciples placed in him. He had used the money judiciously, providing for the daily needs of the group and offering aid to the impoverished they encountered on their journeys. However, as time passed, a subtle yet persistent dissatisfaction began to creep into Judas's mind. He would look at the few coins in the pouch, comparing them to the vast wealth and power of the Roman Empire, and a profound sense of helplessness would wash over him. What could this paltry sum possibly achieve against such overwhelming might? Could these small acts of charity truly alleviate the suffering of the millions of Jews living under foreign rule? Jesus' teachings about not storing up earthly treasures sometimes perplexed Judas. He reasoned that to build any kingdom, whether spiritual or temporal, substantial material resources were necessary. The perceived wastefulness of certain acts occasionally stirred within him an almost uncontrollable resentment. Once, in the house of a wealthy man in Bethany, a woman named Mary had taken an alabaster jar of extremely expensive perfume, pure nard, worth a staggering 300 denarii, nearly a year's wages for a common laborer, and poured it over Jesus' head and feet. The fragrant aroma filled the air, but in Judas's heart a wave of indignation surged. Judas, speaking loudly, his voice laced with reproach, his eyes not concealing his displeasure. Why this waste? This perfume could have been sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor. Surely this is what the teacher always advocates. Jesus looked at Judas with piercing insight, a fleeting shadow of sadness crossing his face. He gently shook his head, his voice soft yet firm, carrying a deep understanding. Jesus, voice gentle but firm. Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want. But you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Jesus' words fell like a cold splash of water on Judas's zealous understanding. Burial? Why was the teacher speaking of death when, in Judas's reasoning, the kingdom they had all longed for was imminent, the time for national liberation drawing near? The doubts that had been simmering within Judas now began to boil, like termites silently devouring the foundations of a seemingly strong structure. He began to question whether he had placed his faith in the right person, whether the path Jesus was treading would truly lead to the freedom he so desperately craved. Whispers of doubt echoed in Judas's mind, planting the seeds of unease and perhaps even betrayal. The atmosphere in the small upper room, where the final Passover meal was taking place, was heavy with an unspoken sorrow, a looming separation that none dared to acknowledge fully. The flickering lamplight cast long shadows across the somber faces of Jesus and the bewildered disciples. Jesus had just completed a profound act of humility, washing the feet of each one of them, a powerful lesson in selfless service and unconditional. So as such they reclined at the table. Jesus broke the silence, his voice lower than usual, tinged with an unmistakable sadness. Jesus, truly I tell you, one of you, one who is eating with me, will betray me. A collective gasp of astonishment, mingled with confusion and pain, rippled through the small chamber. The disciples exchanged furtive glances, each trying to discern the hidden secret in the eyes of their companions. Who among them was capable of such a heinous act? Who could possibly betray the teacher they had followed with such devotion, the one in whom they had placed their unwavering trust? Peter, ever impetuous and outspoken, gestured to John, who was reclining closest to Jesus, silently urging him to ask the teacher of whom he spoke. John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, leaned closer to his master, whispering a question filled with trepidation. John, Lord, who is it? Jesus replied softly, his voice carrying a note of sad acceptance. He dipped a piece of bread into the dish and offered it to Judas, who was sitting not far from him. Jesus, it is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it. As Judas reached out and took the bread from Jesus' hand, something seemed to shift in his gaze. The earlier look of worry and unease was replaced by a chilling resolve, a grim determination as sharp as a newly honed blade. It was as if in that single moment, the internal conflict that had been tearing at Judas's soul had reached its climax, a fateful decision irrevocably made. Jesus, looking directly into Judas's eyes, his voice low yet full of profound meaning, like a sorrowful farewell. What you are about to do quickly. None of the others at the table fully grasped the significance of his words. They assumed that Jesus, as was their custom, was instructing Judas, the keeper of the common purse, to buy what was needed for the Passover festival or to give something to the poor. Judas rose from the table, his movements deliberate and silent, and stepped out into the darkness that now enveloped Jerusalem. Judas thought to himself, his footsteps quickening on the deserted streets. He knows? He knew all along? Then? Why? Why didn't he stop me? Is this his will? But what about the kingdom? What about the liberation he promised? Or was it all just a fleeting dream? A profound stillness blanketed the Garden of Gethsemane, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the ancient olive trees and the heavy sighs of Jesus, echoing in the tranquil air. He knelt in agonizing prayer, the weight of the world's sins seeming to press down upon his shoulders. Holy sweat fell to the ground like drops of blood, a testament to the immense inner turmoil he was enduring. The disciples, save for Judas, had succumbed to exhaustion and worry, their heads heavy with the incomprehensible words Jesus had spoken during the Last Supper. Only Judas remained awake, concealed in the shadows of the gnarled olive trees, his heart a battlefield of belated regret for the act he had just committed and a desperate, reckless plan, a last-ditch effort to salvage the situation in the way he believed was right. Judas thought to himself, his eyes fixed on Jesus' solitary figure. He will be arrested. I have delivered him to them. They will torture him, mock him, and perhaps even kill him. All that he has done, the teachings, the miracles, will it all have been for nothing? Will the kingdom he proclaimed vanish into thin air? No, it cannot end this way. There must be a way. There must be a way for him to finally reveal his true power, for him to be forced to act as the Messiah our people have yearned for. A desperate idea, almost bordering on madness, flashed through Judas's mind. But in his despair, he clung to it as a lifeline. If Jesus were arrested, brought before the public, confronted with the hostility of the chief priests and the curiosity of the masses, perhaps the pressure from those who had witnessed his extraordinary miracles, from those who had heard his powerful sermons would compel him to declare himself as the Messiah, the King of Israel, and ignite a rebellion against Roman rule. Driven by this desperate notion, Judas secretly made his way to the residence of Caiaphas, the powerful high priest, and the elders, who were desperately seeking a way to arrest Jesus discreetly, avoiding any major unrest during the Passover festival. Judas, his voice hushed and urgent, trembling slightly but trying to project an air of control. You seek Jesus of Nazareth? Caiaphas, seated on his imposing chair, his eyes sharp and suspicious as he regarded Judas. Indeed we do, good man. He has been causing unrest, leading the people astray with his blasphemous words, claiming to be the king of the Jews. Do you possess information that would be of use to us? Judas, I know where he often goes. I can lead you to him. But what will you give me in return for this? An elder, standing near Caiaphas, scoffing disdainfully. What do you imagine the life of such a rabble-rouser is worth that you dare to bargain with us, you lackey? Judas, biting his lip, struggling to suppress his rising anger. 30 pieces of silver. The ruling council exchanged glances, a calculating look passing between them, and a wry, knowing smile spread across Caiaphas's wrinkled face. Caiaphas, very well. 30 pieces of silver. Deliver him to us, and you shall have your reward. The cold, hard clink of the silver coins as they were counted and pressed into Judas's hand echoed like a death knell in his ears, momentarily awakening his slumbering conscience. What had he done? Could this reckless plan truly succeed as he had desperately tried to convince himself? Fear, like a venomous serpent, began to coil in his heart, tightening its grip around his chest. But he had gone too far, had plunged his hands into this mire of treachery, and the path of return seemed shrouded in impenetrable darkness. The tranquil darkness of the Garden of Gethsemane was shattered by the hurried footsteps and flickering torchlight of an armed multitude, Roman soldiers and temple guards, all led by the familiar yet now alien figure of Judas. They found Jesus praying with a few of his disciples who had managed to stay awake, his face serene despite the clear understanding of what awaited him. Judas approached his teacher, his heart a tempest of conflicting emotions, a bitter brew of remorse, anxiety, and a fleeting sliver of hope that his desperate plan might somehow still work. Judas, stepping close to Jesus, his voice strained, attempting a semblance of normalcy. Greetings, Rabbi. And then, in that fateful moment, he placed a kiss upon Jesus's cheek, the prearranged sign that would identify him to the waiting captors. Jesus, looking deeply into Judas's tormented eyes, his voice filled with sorrow, yet retaining an extraordinary calm. Friend, why have you come? Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? In that instant, as Jesus's gentle yet piercing gaze met his own anguished stare, the full, devastating truth crashed down upon Judas like a tidal wave. The reckless plan he had clung to in his despair had utterly failed. Jesus offered no resistance, no call for divine intervention, accepting his arrest with a quiet resignation, like a gentle lamb being led to the slaughter. The kingdom he had proclaimed was not an earthly realm built on swords and violence, and the liberation he offered was not freedom from Roman rule, but a far deeper, more profound deliverance from the shackles of sin and death. A profound horror and an overwhelming sense of regret engulfed Judas. He had betrayed an innocent man, the very person he had once believed to be the Messiah, the one who had shown him only trust and unconditional love. The 30 pieces of silver clutched in his hand no longer felt like payment, but like a burning brand, a symbol of his utter shame and unforgivable transgression. The following morning, as the first faint rays of dawn pierced the Jerusalem sky, Judas bore witness to the agonizing spectacle of Jesus being led away, unjustly tried before the Sanhedrin. He heard the baseless accusations, the angry roars of the manipulated mob, and saw the serene yet deeply sorrowful countenance of his teacher. Judas's heart felt as though it were being squeezed in a vice, a relentless remorse gnawing at his very soul. Unable to bear the crushing weight of his guilt any longer, Judas sought out the chief priests and elders, the very men who had paid him for his treachery, hoping against hope that he could somehow undo the terrible wrong he had committed. Judas, bursting into the midst of the assembly of Jewish leaders, his voice raw with pain and desperation, "I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood. Here, take back this money." He flung the bag of silver onto the temple floor, the coins clattering against the stone with a chilling sound, a mournful dirge for Judas's bleeding conscience. The ruling council exchanged cold, indifferent glances, not a flicker of empathy in their eyes for the betrayer's belated remorse. Caiaphas, maintaining his air of authority, a scornful sneer twisting his lips. "What is that to us? See to it yourself." Their callousness and utter lack of compassion were like daggers twisting in the already gaping wound in Judas's heart. He had foolishly hoped that they would recognize their own injustice, that they would perhaps even show leniency towards Jesus. But it was far too late. The stark, irreversible reality of his actions crashed down upon him like a violent storm, sweeping away any remaining vestiges of hope for redemption. Judas fled the temple, his anguished cry of despair echoing through the polluted air of Jerusalem. The darkness within his soul had grown too vast, too encompassing, swallowing every last glimmer of light, leaving him utterly alone to confront the abyss of his regret and sin. The story of Judas Iscariot, the man who had once been a trusted disciple, who had walked alongside Jesus through countless trials and tribulations, concludes in a tragic and haunting manner. Unable to endure the overwhelming burden of his betrayal and the relentless torment of his remorse, Judas sought refuge in death as a final, desperate escape. He took his own life by hanging himself, ending his days in solitude and agony, with no one to offer comfort or forgiveness. Judas's solitary and despairing death serves as a chilling and timeless warning about the devastating consequences of misguided actions and the destructive power of hopelessness when it takes root in the human heart. The 30 pieces of silver, the paltry price of his treachery, brought Judas not wealth or power, but an unbearable weight of guilt and a lonely demise. Yet, the questions surrounding Judas persist, lingering without definitive answers. Was he truly motivated solely by greed, as is often portrayed? Or were there other, more complex factors at play? Misguided hopes for the Messiah's role, unseen pressures from the socio-political climate that pushed him to the brink of betrayal. Did he ever truly understand the profound nature of Jesus' mission and the boundless love he held for humanity? And was there even a sliver of grace, the faintest glimmer of redemption, for the man who betrayed the Savior? The answers to these enduring questions remain elusive, buried deep beneath the layers of time and the inscrutable mysteries of the human heart. We can only speculate, piecing together the scant information recorded in the Gospels and the diverse interpretations offered throughout the centuries. The name of Judas Iscariot has become an enduring symbol of betrayal, an indelible stain on the fabric of history. His name is cursed across centuries, synonymous with deceit, greed, disloyalty, and every form of treachery. The image of Judas, often conjured, is that of a purely villainous figure, a man who sold out an innocent life for a mere pittance. But if we dare to look deeper into the narrative, beyond the simplistic judgments, we find that Judas's legacy extends beyond mere betrayal. His story serves as a profound reminder of the intricate complexities of the human heart, the inherent dangers of mixed motives, the blinding nature of misplaced expectations, and the devastating consequences of flawed decisions when we lose sight of the core values of love and compassion. Judas had hoped for an earthly kingdom, a political liberation achieved through force. He held his own preconceived notions of how the Messiah should act. When reality diverged from his expectations, disillusionment, shattered dreams, and perhaps a twisted sense of righteousness led him down a path he likely never envisioned in his early days of following Jesus. The story of Judas poses difficult and challenging questions for us. Are we imposing our own limited expectations onto others, even onto the divine, which we cannot fully comprehend? Does our zeal sometimes blind us, leading to actions that contradict the very values we hold dear? Do we possess enough compassion and understanding to recognize the complexities behind the actions of others, even when we cannot condone their mistakes? The ultimate secret behind Judas Iscariot's betraying kiss may forever remain an enigma, a mystery buried deep within the annals of time. But the legacy of his story endures, echoing through the ages, reminding us of the fragility of loyalty, the destructive power of despair, and the enduring need for compassion and forgiveness in a world filled with complexities and the shadows that reside within the human soul. Let us remember that even in the darkest corners of betrayal, a flicker of remorse, a faint echo of a broken heart, may still reside. The tale of Judas is not just his personal tragedy, but a mirror reflecting the internal struggles that each of us may face on our own journey of faith and life.